Thank you so much for joining us on today, February 28th, for a legislative update from the League of Women Voters of North Dakota. We will be focused on the election bills and giving you an overview. My name is Whitney Oxendahl, and I'm one of the core advocacy volunteers for the League of Women Voters of North Dakota. And Carol will introduce later. You'll see our advocacy team and what we do as advocacy volunteers. But first, I want to go over where we're at in session, so you know where we're at. I'm going to admit a few more people. There we are. Okay, let's jump in. First off, if you're not a League member or unfamiliar with the League, we are the League of Women Voters of North Dakota. So the League began in 1920 after women got the right to vote. It was a big experiment and continues on a century later. We empower voters and defend democracy in North Dakota. We're nonpartisan. We don't support or oppose candidates or political parties. And we're a grassroots membership organization. And I'm seeing many of our members on this call. We have chapters in Bismarck-Mandan, Fargo-Moorhead, it's called the Red River Valley League, and Minot is the Plum Valley League. And excitingly, which Amy, our other advocacy volunteer, will mention at the end, we are forming a Grand Forks League of Women Voters. So that's exciting news. Here's our agenda for today. Legislative session, where are we at right now? Our advocacy team, an overview of the election bills, what's passed and what's failed. We've been tracking since the beginning. We tracked 60+ bills related to elections, transparency and ethics, and campaign finance. And we will go over some resources we have. Lastly, we will do a Q&A. So if you have questions, you can drop them in the chat or wait for the end of the presentation to ask them. And Amy and Carol and I will be watching the chat. This slideshow has some links in it. You'll see them underlined. This slideshow will be sent to you. So don't worry if you can't click the links on your screen, you will receive the slideshow afterward. All right, so legislative session. The North Dakota legislative session runs in odd-numbered years, and it runs usually January to the end of April. So we are halfway through this session. It is actually on the calendar for the legislative session, the crossover day. So this was the deadline that a chamber had to vote on their bills, and anything passed goes over to the other chamber. So it's like they're swapping today. Anything passed goes to the other one for another hearing and a floor vote. So if you've been tracking a bill and you're like, I didn't get my testimony in the first chamber, you have another chance for the bills that have passed to submit your testimony. It will get another hearing. It keeps the same bill number, and it will go over to the other house, the other chamber, the House or Senate. In this session, we started with over 1,000 bills. We haven't had over 1,000 bills since 2009. So that was a lot of bills to track and read through. We now have about 700 left. Moving forward, we have over 400 House bills, almost 300 Senate bills, and then some resolutions. And you'll see some that we're tracking. They like to submit resolutions that impact elections. So you'll see some of ours we're tracking. All right, so this is the legislative calendar where we're at. It is recess right now. The legislators get a break after a wild flurry of bills coming in, doing a bunch of hearings. They are working late into the evening, many evenings in the week, to keep track of everything. So they get a break Monday and Tuesday. And it's a great time for you to take a break and take a breath. And if you want, work on some testimony for bills coming up. Then March 12th is a crossover for resolutions. So that's when they have to go over to the other chamber. So that's when we'll start seeing more of their hearings come up. March 28th is the deadline for bills in that second chamber to go to appropriations if it needs funding. So that's a big deadline to go over to appropriations. And then April 9th is the deadline for both bills and resolutions to be reported out of committee in the second chamber. So that means they have to have some type of do pass, do not pass, some type of recommendation on them, April 9th. And then we'll see a bunch of floor votes. So we'll see a lot of committee hearings in March. And then May 2nd is, so the legislature can meet for 80 days. And May 2nd would be the 80th day. A lot of time, like last session, they did 75 days, so they got done early. So we might see that again this session. All right, That's it for me, Whitney, one of the advocacy volunteers, and I'm going to pass it over to Carol to introduce our advocacy team and what we do, and then move on to the election bills. Carol.
Hello there. My name is Carol Sawicki. I'm with with Legal Women Voters of North Dakota, and I'm on this legislative advocacy team. There are four of us who are the core group. I'm gonna put me next slide. Okay. Jordan is a pre-law student, and she tracks the bills. She keeps track of all the different bills that come in and finds the ones that are part of our core group of things that we're worrying about election related. Whitney Oxendahl, you just heard from, she is our superstar who has put this all together and makes it all work. Amy Phillips is our testimony writer and person who also keeps track of all the bills. And I am the official lobbyist, so I get to have my name on all the testimony that we present. And also I help not try to figure out what some of the bills that they put in really mean, because sometimes it's a mystery. Okay, next slide. Okay, we have legislative observers all over the state. Some of them observe observe the hearings online. The people in Bismarck especially have gone to see some of the sessions in action, and they report. And for all the hearings that we observe, we report the observation back, so we have a record of what the nitty-gritty of what went on at the legislative meetings. And as it says here, they keep us updated on amendments because the original bills often are changed, and that's not immediately obvious, so we need to keep track of that. And we have 8 volunteer observers, maybe a few more now and then. I don't know, Whitney. Next slide. Okay, we're going to go through the election bills that we have been monitoring. What passed, what failed, and some of them are the ones that passed that we are worried about, especially, or even the ones that we really like. We want to keep track of them to make sure they continue to pass through the next house or next chamber of the legislature. Okay, next. Okay, here are bills that failed or were withdrawn. There was one to change our status, North Dakota's, as from being the only state that does not have voter registration to put in voter registration. That failed, I think, probably largely because it would have been quite expensive to put together voter registration for North Dakota. There was a bill that was going to expand what lobbyists could gift the legislatures. That was I've been withdrawn. I don't think it failed. There was couple of bills that would have made our voter file less private, so that other people in other states could know, like, which party we voted in the primaries. And that was partly related to the separate political party ballots for primaries, which those of you almost all of you probably, who have voted in North Dakota primaries realize that we have an open primary where anybody can vote on either side of either column, either Democrat and Dem NPL or the GOP or independent for that matter, or not independent, libertarian, that's an official party. And so there was a bill suggested that there would have to be separate political parties, so that you would have to pick when you walked in which party's ballot you would like. And there was one that was going to require that all ballots were going to be hand counted after the election. All of these either failed or withdrawn. Okay, next. The good ones that resolutions mostly that we supported but that failed was one in support of DC statehood. If you read through this, you can realize that the people who live in Washington, DC are disenfranchised from voting in Congress or for having a member in Congress. And so this is one of the resolutions that that was submitted, but that failed. And we did submit testimony on there. If you want to, later on, if you can click on this link, it'll show our testimony. Then there's other bills that passed one chamber. These are their bill numbers. HB means it was a House bill and required school districts to allow student voters to leave campus to vote in elections. HB 1099 would add the presidential candidates' first names to the ballot. That caused some confusion because in the last election, especially, the name Harris was listed without Kamala, and some people just couldn't find her name. And the third one was to require 1469 would require people to file an annual statement of interest. Statement of interest is what the candidate's financial interests would be, as in where their jobs or their spouse's jobs are and what stocks they own. And that right now they're only required to file it just when they announce their candidacy, and if they're in for a 4-year term, they don't have to keep filing it every year. This would require them to file every year, and we also submitted testimony for that. And these are
okay.
Okay, sorry. Now we go up. Jump over to Amy. She gets to talk about this.
I get to do the bad bills. Right. Hi, everybody. Amy Phillips. I'm going to be reviewing some of the bills that the League of Women Voters does not support that we have submitted testimony in opposition to. And these first two bills have to do with alternative voting methods. HB 1297 would ban approval voting and ranked choice voting in North Dakota. And HB 1307 would make it so state law overrides local election law. What these two bills are actually doing is amending our Constitution, or actually the Century Code, so that localities, cities, and counties, if they have home rule charter, which Fargo does, will not be able to manage, adopt alternative voting methods, and manage their city elections. This is basically directed at the city of Fargo, which voted in 2018 to adopt approval voting by a large majority, 64% there of the people who voted to adopt approval voting for city elections in the city of Fargo. And it is the only city in the state of North Dakota that has approval or ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting doesn't exist in North Dakota, and Fargo is the only town that uses this other alternative voting method, approval voting. It's been used successfully in Fargo, no complaints from voters or from the city. So we feel that both of these bills are unnecessary and override the will of local voters, particularly in the context of home rule charter, which Fargo has. Next slide. Another problematic resolution are two of these that are limiting the power of the people in North Dakota. As you all probably know, citizens in North Dakota can initiate an amendment to our North Dakota Constitution. And according to the Constitution right now, if citizens are successful in getting a constitutional amendment on a ballot and it passes, it just requires a simple majority for an initiated constitutional amendment to pass. HCR, House Concurrent Resolution 3003, would increase that simple majority required to 60% of the vote required. And then Senate Concurrent Resolution 4007 sounds innocuous, but this would create what's called a single subject rule for all constitutional amendments that are put on a ballot, even those that are initiated by citizens of the state. And the reason that one is problematic is because it's hard to know what a single subject is in the language of an amendment. And it gives all power to make that determination to the Secretary of State, which is quite a lot of power for one person to have. And single subject rules have been the subject of a lot of court hearings in the country, hundreds of them essentially, with courts trying to flesh out what is actually a single subject and what isn't a single subject. And it ends up oftentimes that the courts are the ones then determining whether or not there should be an amendment to the Constitution and what that amendment should say. And that's not what is intended in our democracy, for the courts to be making this decision. So League of Women Voters of North Dakota has submitted testimony against both of these concurrent resolutions. And by the way, I should say that the bills that we're opposing that I'm talking about are still alive. They've either they passed one chamber of the legislature and have moved on to another, and are moving on to the other chamber of the state legislature. So next slide. Another resolution that we're opposed to and have submitted testimony on has to do with the Electoral College in our country. And also, as you can see there on the first line, the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. So this particular Senate concurrent resolution actually states support for the country's Electoral College, and also denounces the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Now, in case you're unfamiliar with the national, well, you probably know, let me say first, that in the Electoral College system, a person can become president without winning the popular vote. That happened in 2016 between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. It's happened at least 4, possibly 5 times in our country's history, where someone has been elected president who did not win the popular vote because of the votes that they got in the Electoral College system. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact has been around since 2006. And this is an effort in the states, it's a multi-state agreement to commit electors to vote for candidates who win the nationwide popular vote, even if the candidate loses the popular vote in their state. So what's happening is individual states have been passing legislation in their states agreeing to become a part of this National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And they would then assign all their electoral votes to the winner of the national vote for president. At this point, there are 17 states and the District of Columbia who have decided to become a part of this National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And their total electoral votes is 209. So 270 electoral votes are required for this interstate compact to become effective. So there are quite a few more states that are needed to sign on to this to reach the 270 electoral vote threshold. The League of Women Voters supports abolishing the Electoral College and supports the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Next slide. Okay, we just wanted to provide you, which you will get when this slideshow is sent back out, some of the resources that are available to you and anyone you'd like to send them to. Next slide. The League has an app which you can use on your phone or on your computer. It's called the League in Action app. Signing on to the, downloading this app will give you access to League action alerts, legislative updates, and legislative events. Next slide. Whitney has recorded some fabulous YouTube videos on a number of topics. You can access these through YouTube, such as how do I track a bill in the North Dakota legislature, how to run for office, how a bill becomes law, how to submit testimony. These are very simple, brief, and thorough overviews of how to do these various things. Next slide. It's easy to become a member of the League. We encourage everyone here who maybe isn't yet a member to become a member of the League. There's the link for doing that. You can follow us on social media. Next slide. And some important announcements. Whitney mentioned this earlier, but we're trying to get a Grand Forks Area League chapter going. There's some passionate people up there who are working on that. If you know of anyone in Grand Forks that you want to alert to this chapter getting started, please let them know. The League of Women Voters US is starting a new membership portal. And members that are already members will receive, either through the states or local leagues, will receive an email to sign up to this new membership portal called Chapter Spot. Also, we have a fundraising effort happening. We're wanting to raise $10,000 this year to contract with someone to help us with communications in 2026. Next slide. Here's some other upcoming events that are happening. Right to Read North Dakota is organizing readouts at local libraries. BizMan League of Women Voters, you can follow them on Facebook to find out when they're doing meetups at the Capitol. Also, Minot has a chapter event coming up on March 10th. There are several events happening in the Red River Valley for the Red River Valley chapter. And then in Valley City, the league is co-hosting with the chamber on March 22nd, a District 24 legislative forum. Next slide. Thank you. We've moved through this quickly, but thank you for being here. And we want to then open it up for questions and answers.